Hey, Dee, sure seems like a short week.
That's probably because we recorded on Monday and now we're recording on Friday, our new day.
Yes, our new day to record is on Fridays, which is nice because instead of like 48 hours to get the episode out there, we'll have 96 hours to get the episode out there, or 4 days roughly, which is very nice.
Yes. And not just the episode, we also write that newsletter.
That's right.
So we have a lot going on and this will be much, much better.
It will be. It will be. So get started on this episode.
Welcome to the Garden Angelist, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden 1.5 acres out of 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelists because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we really want you to love it too.
Yes, we do. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How does your garden grow?
Well, Dee, thanks for asking. Since we last recorded, I haven't done a ton out in the garden other than harvesting stuff. But I finally tackled the garage, which had turned into a very nasty pit where you want to get out of your car and just run inside. Spilled potting soil, pots set around everywhere. And of course, there's the mess left by the now resolved mice issue of last winter. I'm still convinced the mice came in a bag of peanuts that I bought at Rural King. And I noticed it was kind of torn on the bottom. And I'm thinking, I bet I let a mouse in that way, or a whole family. But anyway.
You probably let in a pregnant mouse, which soon became a whole family.
Well, a moment of silence for their dispose of their souls in mouse heaven.
Yeah, goodbye, mice. So, you also made kind of a pledge to yourself, according to these notes.
So, I pledged to not buy any more clay pots for a while because I don't care how pretty they are. I don't care. I have every size out there from gigantian to little 2-inch pots. I do not need any more clay pots. I also discovered that I have a box of bone meal that's from Frank's Nursery and Crafts, and I looked it up. They closed in the early 2000s.
That's old bone meal, man.
Well, bone meal doesn't really ever expire.
Right.
But it just goes to show that I don't use a bunch of bone meal out in the garden. So I thought, you know what? I'm probably just going to take that box and go out there and just cast it all upon
sprinkle it
on the compost pile, do something with it. Anyway, I did pick cherry tomatoes. And I think you jinxed my green beans.
I did not.
Well, you talked about how yours were getting all eaten up by bean beetles and stuff.
Yes.
So I went out there and I thought, you know what? Suddenly there's a bunch of bean beetles out here. So, they get kind of stringier as they get older.
They do.
So I thought, you know what? I'm just going to let grow what grows. And these are going to be my seed stash for next year. That
sounds good.
How about your garden?
Well, in my garden, I thinned out the seedlings for the fall crops. I got that done.
Yay.
And I even thinned a few more this morning. I realized my lettuce has not come up, probably because it was too hot. So I'm going to re-sow it, in a couple of days, because we're going to have some rain. It'll be a good thing. And then I did a lot of weeding on Wednesday, and I took off on Thursday other than watering. And I went to Bustani Plant Farm's opening day. And that was really fun. I did that for my birthday.
It was so nice of them to have opening day coincide with your birthday. Did they have a banner up for you, Dee? Or?
No, they did not. In fact, I think today is his big fall open house he does with speakers and all that kind of stuff. So that was fun. And as we said, today is Friday and supposedly our last extremely hot day. It's supposed to be 100 degrees. So I ran out this morning and watered the pots I don't have on drip. And then I planted 6 of the plants I bought at Bustani and a couple from Big Creek Nursery in Stillwater, which is it's a small nursery, sort of. It's a cool nursery. They have things nobody else has. So that's kind of fun. And then
6 of how many got planted?
12. I didn't buy very much. Jennifer went with me and she was like, and she saw my gardens and it was her first time to see them beforehand. And she goes, where are you going to put any plants? And I said, oh, I have a few holes. So I bought a few things. And also remember, I gotta move some stuff up to the meadow. So I also bought some more goldenrod. I know I pulled out goldenrod in the spring and now I'm putting some up in the upper pasture because in the spring I didn't put never mind. It's a variety. That's all I'm going to say. I'm done with that. Let's play some favorites before you tease me too bad.
Well, I do. Wait, before we go there, you have some nice Instagram reels showing your visit to Bastani, which is beautiful place, very inspiring. I don't know if any of those are on your as reels or if they're just all out there stories, but anyway, people should be heading out there to your Instagram to check that out.
Definitely one of them is a reel. And I did that on purpose because most of it was in stories. And as you know, they only last 24 hours. So I did one reel and it's just of their gardens because when you go in the spring and you buy all these tropicals and other plants that he has, like coleus and things, you don't know what they're going to look like unless you've grown them before, right? So after he closes in June, he plants these gardens with his wife and his staff, and they are really beautiful. And this year they kind of outdid themselves and they had rain. Some of the parts of the state had rain and he was lucky. So there you go.
All right. Let's play favorites. What's your favorite this week?
No, you go for it. You go. Yours is cuter.
Okay. So mine is this little marigold out in the garden. It's the Signet variety, Tagetes tenuifolia. And I went out there and just a few of them came up, I think. I might accidentally weeded some out. But it is just this big green glorious plant. It has this cute little 1/2-inch marigold flowers on it. And I love it to death. And I thought, I'm going to plant that again. And I also wrote a blog post about it today.
Nice.
That's my favorite.
I read that blog post and commented today. It is cute. And you know what? I found all those marigolds that I wanted to grow. The ones I saw on Gardener's World. Remember the one that looks like clown pants? And I found them all. I found all of them. I'm so happy. And I'm actually going to replant Phyllis next year. I saved seeds for it last year and I'm sure they're still good. And so I'm going to actually plant it and grow it next year because I so enjoyed that big old South African Phyllis.
So I have Phyllis out there. She's kind of a backdrop to these little cygnets. But I love these little cygnets, and I'm going to go on a quest to find more. The two common varieties are little gem or lemon gem and orange gem, I think. So I'm going to go on a quest to find some other cygnet type, and that's never mind. That'll be another rabbit hole.
That's like when
someday.
I was looking for mine, Court Jester. That's the name of the one I was looking for, and I found it.
Oh, yes, I remember.
I think it's a French marigold, but I might be wrong. And maybe we should do a whole thing again on marigolds because I'm not clear on them again. You know what I mean? Maybe next year.
African, French, and Signet. Yes, we can do that.
Okay, so my cutting garden is my favorite still. I'm still playing favorites with it. It is really ugly right now. I was a little embarrassed to have Jennifer come over and see it because her flower farm is so pretty. She was very, very gracious. But the point is, even though it has mildew, even though some stuff looks yucky, it is giving me such joy because I cut a bouquet or two out of it every week. And I usually give one away and I keep one. And so it is a joy to go out there and deadhead. And now I'm being able to add some roses to it too, because the roses are starting to bloom for fall. And it just gives me a lot of joy to bring cut flowers in the house. And for about 3 years, I didn't cut anything. So I don't know what changed this year, but it makes me happy.
That is, we all go through different cycles and everything. And I popped over here to Instagram because I think because I started following the flower farm Ladybug
yes,
Lane.
That's Jennifer. Mm-hmm.
That's what and then it's serving me up other types of content.
It's
and
joyful.
So I found this, it is joyful, but I found this one and it is so funny. And I'm going to him haul around here because
she can't find it right now. That's what's happened. So she's going to find it in a second and we will link to it in our newsletter and our show notes because it must be one that is funny. because you love funny.
It is funny. It's called Dirty Punk
Okay,
Gardening.
I haven't gotten that one yet. They're showing me all the, pretty jewel tones and pale colors and all that. And you get, what was it again?
Dirty Punk Gardening.
That's funny.
It's a guy, it says urban gardening, and he's in zone 6B in Ohio. So I'm going to say probably the Cincinnati area. Not for sure. But anyway, the reel they showed me was this one where he's cutting a bunch of flowers from his garden to make a bouquet. And, he just acts like he doesn't know what he's doing. He's just kind of figuring it all out. And he makes this beautiful bouquet.
So obviously he knows exactly what he's doing, but whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll link to him. Where were we, Dee?
We got lost, but go ahead and do that next quote, and then we'll talk more about flowers.
What dreadful hot weather we have. It keeps one in a continual state of inelegance. Jane Austen.
That's for darn sure. I'm feeling very inelegant lately.
I'm going to go out every day. I'm like, it's so hot. I feel inelegant.
That's awesome. Okay, so what we thought we would talk about this week is, in spite of the heat and no sign of fall in my garden, although that's going to change, I'm told it's changing this week, and we're getting rain.
Our highs are in the
cool
70s Our highs are in the 70s for the next couple of days. So
my next week is supposed to be 70s. I'm so excited. All right, but in spite of our excitement, we're going to talk about, what do you do at the end of the garden season?
It's decision time. Yeah. Do you take cuttings? Do you overwinter dormant? Do you take a plant inside? Do you collect seeds?
Or, as the immortal words from that snowy picture, that snowy cartoon that everybody sang for a long, long time, let it go, let it go, let it go.
So I have a neighbor next door, and he asked me last fall, he had some peppers that he really liked. He was afraid he wouldn't be able to get them.
I remember this story.
So he's like, should I dig these up and put them inside? And I'm like, well, you could try.
No.
But I think,
no.
I think you should let it go. Let it go. So let's talk about cuttings, because I am going to take some cuttings of the African blue basil.
Me too. Definitely the African blue basil, because there are no seeds. It does not produce seeds. Even though it produces panicle after panicle after panicle of blooms and looks like it produces seed, it does not produce seed. So you need to take cuttings of it and bring it indoors. And then they're a little complicated. You and I talked about this between ourselves, that when you take them, they look like the most awkward plants as they start to grow.
Yeah. And what I ended up doing, and I think we talked about this before, is you take the cutting, and we'll not go into great detail on taking cuttings. That is so easy to.
I have an article.
Well, we'll just link to that.
Well, we'll have to link to it because it's in the American Gardener magazine.
If it's public facing,
we can link to the. Yeah, if it's public facing, we'll link to it. But I have a whole thing on soft stem cuttings, and so and went into great detail. And their editor held my feet to the fire, so it is an excellent article.
Very good,
because of her.
What I found was, so I rooted them. And then I had them in different pots, and I forgot to water. I'm going to put them together in a bigger pot, because I know what's going to happen. They're going to root. I'm going to keep them watered. They're going to get real tall and gangly. I'm going to take cuttings again, probably in like January, February. Mm-hmm. I'm going to root those. And in all likelihood, it is those that will make it outside next spring.
Right. Because, and I was going to say, with coleus, that's a good idea too. If you take cuttings of coleus, they are mealybug magnets. And I had really bad mealybugs on my coleus this year. I had to throw some of them away. And actually, I had them on one other thing too. I got this in the mail. It was a salvia I got in the mail, and I had to toss it because the mealybugs loved it outside. And I don't have much trouble with them outside, but this year was really wet, so maybe that was why. Anyway, the point is, when I take cuttings of coleus and bring them inside, about after the solstice, when they start growing again, they grow quite well. So then I take cuttings again and I throw away the old coleus because it gets mealybugs, especially on the woody parts. And so I have all this fresh cuttings, and those actually root better, do better, or easier to put in the garden.
Well, let's go to the next thing. Let's skip overwinter dormant, come back to that. Overwinter indoors is
Right.
where you take a plant like a geranium or a begonia and you bring it inside. And I've done both of those. So I brought a begonia
Right.
inside because it was one of the fancy leaf ones. It sulked a lot, it dropped leaves, but it made it. I took it back outside and it did fine. The begonia, I did that too. I never took it back outside. So it's been growing inside for 5 years. Now, it's gradually getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And it was a dwarf variety to begin with. So I thought, you know what? Now I'm to the point I need to baby it and kick it back outside next spring and it'll just take off again. But if you bring it inside, you got to watch for bugs, cuttings and plants. Bug, it doesn't take much. And you've got mealy bugs, you've got aphids, you've got spider mites, you've got scale. I mean, I don't want to scare anybody.
Scale.
Not to mention
Gross.
pill bugs and spiders that are hiding in the pot and ants. I'm not a big fan of in and out, as you can tell.
It's not my favorite either because you really do need to inspect your pots and do various things. But the truth is, well, you know what? I don't overwinter a lot indoors because I have a greenhouse.
Yes, I have to bring it
so
inside.
That's a different deal.
Yeah.
Right. And so a lot of people have sunrooms. You have a sunroom and people bring them in for that. I will bring in all of my begonias, all of my pelargoniums, which are the geraniums. I will bring in, but did I tell you I killed some of my geraniums by accident?
Well, I wouldn't think you'd kill them on purpose like they were lemon trees or something.
Yeah, but I did kill a lemon tree. Yeah, I did for real.
On purpose.
Oh, well, a blood orange tree on purpose because I don't want scale anymore.
All right, but
so I've only got 2 trees
Tell
left.
us how you accidentally killed your geraniums.
So they were extremely happy and they'd gotten very overgrown. And so I fertilized them again, but then I cut them back. And then all of a sudden we had that bad heat wave and they died because they were by cutting them back, I exposed some of their
tender bits,
exposed cut spaces. And they're tender bits and they were not happy. And so I lost probably 5, which makes me sad.
That's a lot.
Now, I did not lose any of my scented geraniums. These were all zonal. I lost my zonals, which you can replace.
Yeah, those are.
So it's not that
those are. I don't want to say a dime a dozen because they're not cheap anymore, but they're readily able.
And these
to
were
find.
fancy. They were fancy zonals, so they were expensive.
That's what I have.
It happens.
I have 4 fancy zonals, and I'm just going to take them once we've gotten close to frost. I'm going to take them, knock them back a little bit, throw them in the garage, in my clean garage, and let them.
So I have a question about this. How cold does your garage get in winter?
It does not get to freezing. The coldest it's ever gotten is maybe the high 50s because it is connected to the house. All the walls are insulated. There isn't a heat duct out there, but it really's got to get pretty darn cold. It's never frozen out there. That's important.
So that would be a great place to also put citrus trees because they really like 40-degree weather. They don't really like being in the greenhouse because it's too moist.
My neighbor, I noticed he has some lemon type trees that I'll see on sunny days in the spring. He's drug them outside, but he's keeping those in his garage.
So my garage is not attached to my house. There's a dog run in between. And I almost wonder if I close the doors to the dog run and put my citrus trees on the side of the dog run that is next to the house, if that would cause the same issue. And you know what? I think I am going to do that this year just to try because they like it about 40, 45. Now it does get really cold in there sometimes. So I'll have to think about this some more, but I cannot put things in the garage because it gets too cold.
And so that's the other thing. Let's talk about overwintering dormant because you need a place that's not going to freeze. If you have canna roots, dahlia roots, or tubers, you need a place that's going to stay relatively dry, but not so dry that they dry out and not so wet that they mold. And it's kind of like you need a good spot. And so if you have a garage like mine that doesn't freeze, that's a good spot.
Do you overwinter them in sand or anything like that? Or do you just leave them in their pots? Or do you put them in pots?
When I haven't done it in a while.
Or sawdust?
When I haven't done it in a while. But what I would do is, in my case, I would lift the dahlia out of its pot, the cannas out of its pot. I would clean them off. I would let them air dry, and then I would put them in a clean box, or you can buy those open crates.
Well, if you order enough bulbs, you get those open crates for free.
Yes, I was just thinking, because I have one of those that I got from a bulb order.
I do too. They're great, big plastic crates, and I use them for all kinds of things. So,
but that gets a lot of airflow around them, and then you can kind of pick them up and shake them and inspect them. And as soon as you see rot on any of them, that rot one has to go out,
because it will infect the whole entire group. I have also overwintered cannas in pots, because sometimes I grow some of my cannas in pots. And if I overwinter those in a smaller pot, I just put it at the back of the greenhouse in a cool spot. I cut it back and just leave it there. And then I don't water it much. And I do the same thing with dahlias. I've done dahlias many times because heat rises. And so you can often, and I have a brick floor, so it stays kind of cool. And I've done that before too. So there's lots of options, but it's a lot of work. So
there is.
That would bring us to our last part of this topic, which is we haven't talked about collecting seeds. We'll talk about that. But we can let them go. It is okay to let tropical plants go.
Or any plant. If you're geraniums, coleus.
It's a fling, people. It's okay.
And that's our friend Marianne Wilburn, who wrote Tropical Plants and How to Grow Them. She has all the relationships figured out for you. So she would be a good inspiration to read, to say, yeah, it's okay to let it go. Especially if you know you can readily rebuy it again in the spring.
And if you really, really love certain plants, like I love Tithonia, for example. Now we're talking about annuals, true annuals. So Tithonia produces seeds at the end of the season, and I collect some of them and keep them and overwinter, keep them. And then, or you could just throw them down in the spot where you grew the other thing if you don't care. And then you can collect seeds of zinnias if you want to. There's a lot of hybridization going on with zinnias right now. And you can collect, and I
pause on that moment. So the hybridization of zinnias. So there's a couple of things.
Okay, I said that wrong. Okay, I said that wrong. It's not really hybridization. It's really selection.
That's what I was going to say.
It's cross-pollination and selection. So I used the wrong word, and I knew you were going to come in and correct me. I could see it by your face. So it's selection, and there's a difference. Hybridization, you can explain if you want to.
I don't want to now, but a hybrid is basically they have crossed two parents to get that variety. You will never get that variety from seed from it when it's grown. You got to go back and get the hybrid seed each time. Those aren't worth collecting. The selection ones.
Right, like Blue Lake green beans. You don't want to do Blue Lake green beans.
But the provider beans, they're an open pollinated heirloom variety. I'm going to collect the seeds from those.
Right. So I'll just quickly, I'm thinking about what I'll be collecting seeds from. So I'm going to collect seeds from Tithonia. I'm going to maybe collect some seeds from my pale zinnia seeds, because they're all in one section by themselves. And let me also state that when people are working on, say, zinnias or another plant that is pollinated by creatures, they actually put those little gossamer bags on top of the flower so that the flower stays a little more true. And if they're really trying to do that, Floret Flower actually has a whole video, and it's also in the newest season of growing Floret. And I'm kind of making this face because it kind of grosses me out. They use those flies. There's a type of fly that everybody uses to do this. And so what they do is they make an isolation chamber, and whatever it is you're wanting to pollinate, you put it in that chamber, and then they release the flies. It's pretty gross.
And they release the flies in the chamber to do the pollination.
Yes, because they're very, very good pollinators, and then they die. They're not, they don't stick around. So anyway, so there's that. And I'm trying to think of what else I'm going to collect seeds from. Oh, probably my Verbena bonariensis, because I like to sprinkle those around.
So I'm growing that Verbena bonariensis. Vanity.
So
I don't know if that is a hybrid or or a selection if it would come true from seed. It's the only one out
I have
there.
no idea.
But I'm going to shake some of those seeds around, see what happens.
That sounds fun. And it might not come back true, but it might come back pretty, so it doesn't matter. I think we've kind of exhausted
We
that.
have. I'm collecting also the sunflower seeds. We talked about that.
Oh, I collected those too. I have a packet of those. And so I will have, because I want to see what comes from them next year.
All right. Next quote.
We all have something in our nature that requires contact with the earth. And that's one of our favorite writers, Charles Dudley Warner. He was an American essayist, novelist, and he was a friend of Mark Twain. And apparently he co-authored the novel The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, which is no longer today. The Gilded Age is long gone. But his gardening stuff holds true.
A Summer in a Garden. So all this talk of overwintering and everything, now, I don't have a greenhouse. You have a greenhouse. You also have a cold frame that I don't have. But we're going to talk about cold frames. We're going to reference the Family Handyman article that you wrote last year about what is a cold frame greenhouse.
Right, which that came from a search that people were doing. To me, they're two different things. And that's actually in the first paragraph because they insisted that we were going to call it a cold frame greenhouse because that's the search.
Exactly.
Right? And that's how their stuff is written is according to the algorithm, according to searches. So the difference between a cold frame and a greenhouse is the greenhouse is heated. A cold frame is not heated by anything except the sun. And so you can make a cold frame very easily on top of a raised bed. I have two of them in front of my greenhouse, and they are facing the west side, and they sit actually on our old driveway. So they are 6 to 8 inches deep, and so it's a raised bed that is on my driveway. A lot of people bury the boards and in earth, which you can do that too. A cold frame has to have a slanted roof, and then it has a back that is not slanted, and it usually has windows. It's clear plastic, usually 3-ply plastic, but some people use windows. But here I would not do that because of hail. You would not do that because you get hail too. And so it has this slanted roof to capture the sun and to capture the sun all the way on the edges. Okay. So it is really, really easy to build one. And I built my raised beds, and then I actually bought the top, which is my cold frame top, from the same company that built my greenhouse, which is Bartlett Bench. They're the most famous bench builder of, they build benches for greenhouses all over the United States and probably the world. And then they also build greenhouses. So, mine are 4 feet by 4 feet because that's what I had. And that was the size of the raised beds they were on. And it's pretty typical size for a greenhouse because you need to reach to the middle. So sometimes you can grow things in a cold frame, like for example, spinach.
Right. Spinach.
So I've started spinach and carrots in mine. Anyway, you can do spinach, you can do carrots, you can do lettuce, you can do green onions, scallions. There are so many things. Kale is a good example. So many different things you can grow. Swiss chard.
And if you look up, Nikki Jabor has books on the gardening in winter that are very helpful if this is what you want to do. I'm thinking about it more from overwintering versus growing a bunch of, but you can grow tons of stuff, and sometimes you're growing it, not so much growing it, but you get it grown to a certain point, and then in the cold frame, it sort of stays preserved, so to speak.
It just sits. Yeah, it sits until the sun comes up again. I mean, until we go through the solstice, and once the days lengthen again, then things start to grow again. That's the same phenomenon in the greenhouse too, unless you have supplemental lighting. So it's really a phenomenon. I mean, because I will be watching over my plants, trying to make sure and keep them all alive in the greenhouse, keep my heat going, cold frames, watching over them, making sure they get occasional watering, right? And they just sit there. And then the solstice happens. And after the winter solstice, then suddenly the sun starts shining more and daily.
It is crazy. Now, here's the thing.
It's crazy.
I don't really have a good place to put one in my yard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're supposed to have southern exposure to capture the most light. So mine have a
So
southwest exposure.
if I were to have one with a southern exposure, like against the house, it would be here in front, which that's not good. That's not going to work.
No. And sometimes people try to do them. And, and the other thing you have to remember is they need automatic vents, or you have to vent them, because you'll have warm days in winter where you need to raise them up a little bit. Mine have automatic venting. They raise up with the temperature. Once it gets to a certain temperature, there's a spring that expands and a wheel.
So I am not likely to get a cold frame greenhouse. The west side of my house, where's west? It's too shaded from the house on the other side. And the east side, I think it would just get too cold over there. That house is further away. And then the back is actually north. That's a terrible place for it.
Yeah, you don't want it north because you'll never get enough sunlight and it won't do well.
I guess if I wanted, I guess if I wanted to simulate a cold frame, I would put lights in the garage.
Yes, and that's a good point, because your garage stays, fairly warm, and you could actually grow salad greens and all kinds of stuff in your garage.
No, I do not want to do that.
I don't think you want to do that, do you?
I'm going to do the next quote and go into our book topic.
I didn't think so. Okay. Sounds good. But if someone wants a cold frame, we are going to link to that article, and it's pretty extensive for a family handyman article.
The garden came to me because I needed it. And that's Barney Bardsley, who wrote a book called A Handful of Earth. And she is quoted in Why We Garden, which is the book we talked about last week. So the funniest thing, this morning I looked up that book on Amazon, A Handful of Earth. And I started looking at the reviews, and they all reference Octavia Butler, the author. And so I dug a little further and found out that a year or two ago, somebody wrote a book called A Handful of Earth, A Handful of Sky, which was about Octavia Butler. And so people would leave reviews. They would just do a search for A Handful of Earth, land on this Barney Barnsley's book, which is all about the year where I think it's the year her husband died. She had a 1-year-old, and sort of the going through the year, mourning, and how much solace she found in her garden. But you can't copyright titles of books. And so if you do a search for A Handful of Earth, there are more than one book. And so that brings us to this week's book is called The Cottage Garden by Klaus Dalby. Tons and tons and tons of books with this title, no doubt. But this book came to us when we needed it.
Yes, very much so.
Lovely.
Yeah, because it's August, but now it's September, but it came to us at the end of August. It is lovely. And, Klaus, even though we haven't met him, we both believe he is a lovely person.
He goes live on Instagram, and per the press release, he's called the Scandinavian Martha Stewart because he's a designer, florist, and Danish gardener. Tons of fans around the world. He's been a publisher, television personality, designer of glass vases. He uses densely packed plants and changing seasonal displays, often in monochromatic color palettes.
He does. That's very popular over there.
It is.
Because I follow several people who do something similar. But this book is about, it starts with history. And actually, Linda Vodder wrote the foreword. And Linda is a friend from Oklahoma. And she and Klaus are very, very good friends. And so she wrote the foreword for him, because this isn't just a book about his garden like so many of his books are.
It's not about his garden at all, really.
No, it's not. It actually starts with history. And he starts out kind of explaining where the cottage garden came from. And then it moves on to being about all of these different cottage gardens that he has visited throughout the world. I mean, they're all over the place. And they're so beautiful. And the pictures are so, so beautiful.
Yeah, it's like the opposite of how he gardens when you get into these cottage gardens, which I think they were a a way to describe it is a planned free for all in the garden.
Yeah, because they started out as like the cottage that was on the grand estate. And so the gardener usually lived there, and he would get plants because you always produce more plants than you actually need. And he would bring them home. And then that was part of his salary in some ways. And so they are a mix of both food and also plants. And I would say my garden is a cottage garden. It is a free for all out there of everything, but a very large cottage garden because they don't tend to be this large usually.
Yeah, there tend to be very personal gardens, and flowers that people love, and a lot of self-sowers, a lot of rambling roses. He just goes through the whole thing, and the photography in this thing is gorgeous, as you said. And this is just a wonderful book to go through. And the style that I tend towards, and I think about doing it more and more, is like on page 207. And there's a picture there of a garden in Germany, and it's got the boxwood border that's clipped and structured. And then inside is just the chaos of a beautiful flower garden that's just going crazy. But that bordering around it kind of gives it that sense of structure that's helpful
very
to
English
my mind
too.
Yes,
that
I love
same
that.
idea. Although they've all got boxwood blight and also that nasty moth, and so they're having to change from boxwood to other plants that they can grow like boxwoods. But same idea. And I have one boxwood hedge because that's my ode, my homage to that type of gardening. More French, but yes, that kind of free for all in the middle, which is kind of what mine is. Mine's a series of garden rooms, and I mix all the stuff together. Now it is more prairie than it used to be because I use more native plants because I care about pollinators. That's important to me. But I would say my garden looks more like a cottage garden in the spring when the tulips come up. You know what I mean? It's over time, it starts to look more prairie as those prairie perennials start to grow up. So
I would characterize this book as it's a garden book. It's also a bit of a travel log because, like we said, Klaus went to visit these gardens. Gardeners always make friends with each other. And so these people become Klaus's friends because he's visiting them multiple times. And I think in one case,
I'd love to be Klaus's friend.
I think in one case, I mean, he knocks on the door and says, "Can I see your garden?" Because that's what people do.
I would let Klaus I'd be horrified because I would be like, "Oh my gosh, that's Klaus Dalby and he wants in my garden." But you know what? He is such a nice man. They all said
yes. Well, it reminds me, Elizabeth Lawrence, her garden is a bit of a cottage garden. It's still there, but she's not. But she would have famous people knock on her door and want to see her garden based on her writings and stuff, which is kind of cool.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, I'm not famous, but people occasionally knock on my door once they figure out where I live. So, and I know that happens to garden communicators in town because they can find their houses easier.
What do you?
So anyway, we loved this book. It was so much.
We love this book, and again, this is one of those books. Ooh, this is staying in my library.
Yeah, I won't be giving this one away. I love the dreaminess of it, and I will read it all winter.
Yes, I was going to say this is one to put on the coffee table. It's a bit oversized. It's not quite coffee table size, but let's call it coffee table size. And it is one to sit there and, just pick a garden and go through it and learn about it. And it's wonderful.
Yes, it is. Oh. All right. Want me to do the next? Oh, do you want to repeat it again? The title you usually do.
The Cottage Garden by Klaus Dalby.
So I'll do the next quote. The kiss of the sun for pardon, the song of the birds for mirth. One is nearer God's heart in a garden than anywhere else on earth. I think we all have that memorized. It's by Dorothy Frances Gurney. Excuse me. The ragweed is blooming in Oklahoma and it's killing me. So 1858 to 1932, she was an English hymn writer and poet. And actually, this is a very long poem.
Yes.
But we only decided to do the famous quote. You have written here that she is a shy, devout girl with an inner passion for nature, and she began writing short poems at an early age. And then she married an actor called Gerald Gurney in 1897, and he was the son of Archer Thompson Gurney, who was a Church of England, or in other words, an Anglican clergyman and hymnodist. I didn't know that was what it was called, hymn writer. In 1904, her husband was also ordained a priest of the Church of England. And then in 1919, Dorothy and her husband converted to the Roman Catholic Church, which sometimes happens.
Interesting life.
Very interesting. So I want to say one more thing about the poem. My father-in-law gave me a sign years ago, and I have it in my front garden, and it has that verse on it. And he handed it to me, and he said, "You're the only real gardener I know. You need this."
That's nice.
And so when I see it, it's a very sweet thing that he gave me years and years and years ago. So our dirt, I found it. Actually, you know who found it? Amy, non-gardening BFF Amy found this. It's about Jennifer Garner, and it's out of the Oklahoman, which is it's the Central Oklahoma newspaper. There's also the Tulsa World. And so she took her family farm, and now they grow pumpkins on it. And those pumpkins are put into her I think it's called Once Upon a Time baby food. But it's either her cousin or her uncle, somebody in the family runs the farm. And then she comes in and plays on it. Like she comes in and drives the tractor, and she might be there to plant some seeds. But she bought the farm. It used to be in the family. Then it left the family, and then she bought it back. So she's doing some good.
She is. She has a line of organic baby foods.
Baby food.
And so, she's some of the.
Yes, I think it's called Once Upon a Farm. I said Once Upon a Story, but I think it's called Once Upon a Farm. Anyway, it's a very sweet little article, and we are going to link to it because it's nice.
It is very nice.
And pumpkins, it's that time of year.
All right. Here's the next quote. In the garden or allotment, we are king or queen. And that is Monty Don. And
and he's right.
Just by chance, today is the 1-year anniversary of the death of Queen Elizabeth II. So interesting that we have a royal quote like that.
It is. And also, I think there's a new rose coming out for Queen Elizabeth, and I think it's called Elizabeth, and it's David Austin. I think I saw it in my email this morning because they had it just for a little bit, and then they were out of it. So I think they did it for her Jubilee, but now she's passed away.
Yeah.
And it's a beautiful thing. I kind of want it.
They're planning something big for 2026 on the 100th anniversary of her birth. They're going to have some big something. They're planning it.
So all these roses that I'm now growing in containers, I'm going to have to figure out a place to put them so that it looks stylized instead of looking like a jumble of plants that Dee collected because she's insane. But that's another topic for another day.
You should
wait a
minute.
Huh?
You should run with what God gave you. And if he gave you garden insanity, I'm telling you, go for it.
You think I haven't done that?
Well, you're sounding like you were easing back, and I'm like, oh no, keep running forward, Dee. keep going. Rabbit holes
until I can run no more. Okay, so rabbit holes. I'll do mine first. I have 3 garden coaching clients next week. Thanks, everyone. And I do a lot of research beforehand and after I meet with the client because sometimes I usually give them a series of 3 questions before I meet with them based upon what they want. And then we talk about it. And if we're doing it via Zoom, they send me photos. If we do it in person, I'm at their garden. But I also need to do research when they come back. So that's what my rabbit hole has been researching for garden coaching. And if people need garden coaching, they better get on my schedule because I am really, really busy this fall. Your turn.
Very good. Well, I am reading another book by Elizabeth von Arnim. As you know, she wrote Elizabeth and Her German Garden. And then I talked about The Solitary Summer where, she wrote about a woman who dreamed of spending all her summer in the garden. So somehow I ran across on one of these blogs that I subscribe to or whatever about book reading. And this is going to be hilarious, but they called September Spinster September, where they are reading books about spinsters, women that have never married.
How funny.
Anyway,
how funny.
So they had a list of like 20 of them. And one of them was a book called Father, which was by Elizabeth von Arman. So I looked it up and I thought, you know what? I'm going to read that. So it's about this woman. She's about 33 at the beginning of the book. And 15 years earlier, when her father died, when her mother died,
when her mother dies,
she promised her mother she would take care of her father, which entailed living in a stuffy old apartment in London where he would transcribe to her the books, his novels that never sold very well. She would write them all down. And he sounded a bit fussy, like, taking forever on what the sentence should be. And anyway, he shows up. And so her life is just that and nothing else. And she longs to live in the country and have a garden, which is what her mother always longed for. But anyway, so one day his father comes home with a new wife and, they squabble a little bit behind closed doors. And then she realized that this is the freedom she has been seeking.
She's free.
She's free. He's got a wife.
I would so run. I would pack my little bag, little kind of English bag, and I would run.
She has run to the country where I've gotten to the point where she has just rented a 4-bedroom, unfurnished cottage called Rose Cottage with the conveniences outside, which means it has an outhouse, from the local vicar. Yeah. And it's already proven to be kind of funny how she got this. It takes a little bit of time to get used to this style of writing because these are written in the early 1900s. Long, convoluted sentences, which I love those anyway. So I thought, by the time it's all said and done, maybe I will have read all of Elizabeth's books because this is the 4th one that I'm diving into.
So is it morbid to kind of read about spinsters or what?
It's funny. She writes about it in a funny way.
I know. I would think some of them would. Maybe that's the point, is that women who decided not to marry were, people used to feel sorry for them, but I don't know that that was always the case. I think a lot of women just don't decide to be married. And I think back then it was looked at differently than it is now.
So I doubt our listeners, this isn't a spoiler because I haven't even finished the book, but they describe her in sort of like she's a stodgy thing and people call her mom. And so she looks like somebody's mother. And she makes the point that when she's not smiling, she looks rather grim, but when she smiles, she lights up the room. But she didn't smile for 15 years because she was stuck in the London with her father transcribing all, being his stenographer.
She was basically his mother.
And secretary.
And secretary. Yuck. That sounds like the worst. But I'm really glad that she's now at Rose Cottage. And I think there's a reason it's called Rose Cottage.
And then they've set it up, though, I think, based on what I read, that there's 2 vicars involved, 2 single vicars. And I think both of them will end up being interested in marrying her, and she'll have to choose between the 2 vicars.
Or choose not to marry them. Who knows?
Well, the one vicar that she's rented Rose Cottage from, he lives with his spinster sister.
Of course he does.
But he likes to putter around in his garden. So it'll be...
Well, we will have to have a report on how all this
I will
goes.
finish the book and report next week.
We better move on to garden commissions.
Okay, you go first.
I am going to do more weeding because it's that time of year. I'm getting all of that mulberry weed out of my garden. Ha ha ha. And I'm going to do a little planting because guess what I bought? I bought more little alliums, and this is lavender bubbles. So I'm going to have millennium on each end of that bed, and I've got a nice group of them. And then in the middle, I'm going to do lavender bubbles, which is a little taller and a different color. Won't that be pretty?
That will be very pretty. I was going to say I have allium millennium, and that grows like a daggone weed almost. Anybody wants some when they come over, I just dig it up.
Dig up a little piece of it and give it to them. It's fabulous stuff.
But I have serendipity, which is taller. It's in a different spot. And then I have one in the pink garden. The name escapes me, which is more pink, but it's not that pink, but it's pinkish.
It's on the pinkish side.
Exactly.
And we did a little piece on these little alliums, if I can find you the link. All right. So I'm also going to buy some new pots for roses. And since I'm leaving these roses outside, they will probably be really nice big plastic pots because I only have 3 frost-proof clay pots. As much as I'd like them all in clay, that's probably not going to happen because if you leave terracotta outside and it's not frost-proof, it cracks. Okay, so then some potting soil. I got to go buy some potting soil. That's it.
So I'm going to get busy. I got to get Mom's to plant the front entrance because I didn't do that. We only had 4 days since our last recording.
Right.
I have some hydrangeas that Proven Winners sent us to trial, which are lovely. I'm going to plant those out. I got to get some lavender into the ground that I grew from seed. Clean up, tidy up, weed up all that mulberry weed, and basically enjoy the garden in the coolest of the day. Highs in the 70s all week.
Yeah, and next week is supposed to be absolutely beautiful. So I will be in the garden when I'm not garden coaching every single day.
Very good.
Well, and I'll just do it before I go garden coach. So there you go.
All right. Well, we want to thank you for listening to The Garden Angelist. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
And if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. We so appreciate those. It helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share your podcast with your friends? We don't just talk about gardening, as you can see. Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topic, plus links to our own websites.
And if you're smart, you'll subscribe to our Substack newsletter. It's free, The Garden Angelist at Substack.com. And it's also linked to in our show notes. If you do, you get a link early to listen to the podcast.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing. Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thanks to everyone who has done that. It was lovely chatting with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.